Back here on SportsLine. Earlier today, we had a chance to go over to Vanderbilt and meet with, along with a bunch of other members of the media, Vanderbilt Athletic Director Candice Lee, for kind of the state of the union of where Vanderbilt is right now in the scheme of college athletics. The big story everywhere right now is name, image, and likeness and the impacts that it has had on college athletics. She talked a lot about that, a lot about the facility upgrades going on at Vanderbilt, and more just general things about the athletics program. We want to share some of that with you here tonight on the program. So let's take a listen to Vandy AD Candice Lee.
NIL, I know that's a big thing. It's a thing that hit you out of the blue in the last year. You got all kinds of talk about SEC teams, stuff they're doing. Where do you guys level the playing field with your competition within the league on how you do it?
So I think good question, and NIL is something that it's changing the landscape of college athletics. I would say that I wouldn't say that it came out of the blue per se, but I would say that it's ramped up over the last year, just given all of the pressures on college athletes and previous regulations that prevented them from monetizing the NIL. I think we kind of knew it was coming, right? But you're right, Chris, you can't predict the direction that it will take. Our approach has been to be really thoughtful about how we attack it. And being in Nashville, and just with our brand and with our relationships, we think that our student athletes have great opportunity to monetize their name, image, and likeness. And we do have several student athletes who are doing that now. How we compete with it, when we think about how we want to support our student athletes, NIL and the resources to do it become part of our broader commitment to supporting all parts of their student athlete experience. So that's how we think of it. Of course, it comes up in recruiting. I can't speak to what other schools are doing, but certainly as student athletes learn more and more about it, I think recruiting is where you have to be prepared to talk about it, but I would also say retention. And being in Nashville, we think we have great opportunity. Even with just some of the corporate relationships we have now. So it's an area where I think, you all know this, that there's no federal solution right now. So there are some NCAA sort of minimum guidelines, but each state is operating with its own set of rules. So it takes a lot of collaboration. I feel good about where we are right now, and there'll be more information coming, but it's an area where I think we've been pretty proactive, but we'll be able to, I think it will be an advantage for us when it's all said and done.
Would you like to see some federal guidelines to kind of just make sure everybody's playing by the same rules?
I think what would be, playing by the same rules, I think, is the key. So I think there are probably a number of ways that you could get there, but I do think that would take some of the guesswork and some of the mystery, some of the stress that people may have around this very big topic. But it's like anything else. The world begins to calibrate and things will smooth out. I just want to make sure that we're proactive when it does smooth out so it can be an advantage for us. But I always think it's good when everybody's playing by the same set of rules.
There's been a lot of talk that kids go in the portal and then they get bought through NIL. Kids aren't playing for free. How big of a problem, when you talk to your coaches, do you perceive that? And then how do you guys feel about the ethics around that? Obviously, you've got to play a game, but you've got parameters and guidelines to work around, too.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern there is, and I think that this is a broad perspective, not just Vanderbilt, but I think in general, people do not want NIL to equal pay for play. So I think there is a difference on paper between the two. Everybody may not be experiencing it in real time as being different, but pay for play is not amateurism. And I think that we want to preserve amateurism. So I think the way that we talk about it is NIL being a part of modern collegiate athletics. And we recognize that. We do not believe that pay for play should be a part, not in a way that undermines the educational aspect and the amateurism aspect of being a student athlete. So it's a, I think your question is an important one, because sometimes those things are being considered one and the same. We have to give ourselves permission to talk about what we do differently, but I still say it's got to come back to the same core values that are why we got into this business to begin with. I shouldn't even say business, but why we got into the profession, which is about education.
You said a minute ago you thought eventually things will calibrate and smooth out. How do you see that specifically moving?
So, I know I can't predict, but part of it is that anytime you have something new, there's that initial upheaval, there's that initial uproar, and then things begin to find a cadence and calm down. So I'm also just speaking generally. How I think NIL will change, I do think that there will have to be some intervention. So we've got to decide, is that led by us as institutions or conferences? Is there a national solution? Is it federal? All questions that I don't have the answer to, but again, I go back to playing by the same set of rules is always, I think, a good thing.
There's kind of a school of thought that some would say it could help Vanderbilt because of the size of Nashville's market, maybe a program like baseball where you've had a lot of big name players come through, but there's also the thought that it could hurt smaller program, but a program that hasn't had as much success in football, for instance, versus your Alabamas or Texas A&M, that have potentially war chests to really make an impact here. How do you view that? Do you view, because you said you think it could be an advantage for us, I guess my question would be why?
Yeah, because I think that the resources that we have access to, not just, so I understand why you asked your question, but I think it's, so one, the resources that are available here, but also because of the brand, so how strong the Vanderbilt brand is. In and of itself, students or individuals, just people being able to monetize their name, image, and likeness makes sense. So this idea that now student athletes can do it, I would say that's been a long time coming. So as we think about modern college athletics and student athletes advocating for themselves, being able to benefit from a free market, being able to utilize the resources that are available to their non-athlete peers, if you think about that, this has been a long time coming. So I don't think that we have to just fundamentally change everything that we do, because what makes the brand attractive is still the case. Right. So I think that individuals now have access to do things that they didn't have the chance to do before. That's a good thing. I don't want to underreact, but I don't want to overreact, because I still say that what we offer is, it is worth investing in. It is worth people being affiliated with. So that's why I think it's going to be an advantage for us.
I guess most recruits who would choose a school based off some NIL deal probably aren't coming to Vanderbilt. I guess a recruit would pick Vanderbilt for a different reason. Is that kind of where you're going with the brand?
Well, I would say, I know that kids make decisions for lots of reasons. So I would, your individual perspectives, I wouldn't want to comment on why. I do think that the young people that we bring into our community, they recognize that there is great opportunity here to do a lot of things, and NIL is just one of several pieces, right? So when we think about a holistic experience, it's one piece of that. I remember, I just thought this was so well done. I heard Clark Lee talk about this in an interview not too long ago, and he talked about wanting, his football players to understand that coming to college, like, your highest earning potential would not be recognized here. Like, if we do what we're supposed to do, and we talk about this being a 40-year decision versus a 4-year decision, this puts you on a trajectory to maximize your potential in so many ways. You shouldn't peak at Vanderbilt. If we're not in any way, not financially, not from a character standpoint, not from an athletic standpoint, not from an academic standpoint, that this should set you on your journey to maximize your potential, but the ceiling is not here. And so I think if you take that approach, I like how he was much more eloquent than I in saying it, but I'm trying to paraphrase. But I like what he's saying there. And NIL is, you can consider that in that approach too, right? So people who are making the decision to join us here recognize that there is a lot to this experience and the opportunity that you have to compete and win at Vanderbilt.
transfer admission never been easier. I think you've got to finish your last 60 hours at Vanderbilt. Is that correct?
So you're talking about for undergraduate transfers?
Yes.
Yeah, because you have to establish residency, so I think it's a minimum of 60 hours.
Yeah, I know that's never been easy for any coaches. The portal's made it a bigger thing. How do you help your coaches with that? How are you helping your coaches with that? Where is it maybe not realistic, say past the 60-hour mark or whatever that would be?
So the 60-hour mark, though, that's specific to undergraduate transfers who would then need to establish X number of hours in residence to then get a Vanderbilt degree. So the 60 hours is, in some cases, that might affect somebody's ability to transfer, but that's really more about what you would be required to do here in order to then get a degree. So I think, like in your example, Chris, somebody that's maybe been an undergraduate at another institution for 3 years, that they might not be as attracted to coming to a place where then you would still need to do X number of hours in residence to get a degree, because it might take longer. So it just might not be as attractive. I think that, I'm not a coach, but I think a lot of the undergraduate transfers that we see, it's a little bit easier for them if they're younger. Right, so you got a little bit more academic runway, you know what I'm saying? So maybe it's somebody that has been a freshman or maybe a sophomore at another institution that then is going to transfer in. It's very specific to the degree, and it's also, just what their academic profile looks like. So that's a thing that can be hard for people to understand. It's not like a cookie cutter approach. So that's just specific to undergrads. I think that there is, we've had some sports that I think that have really benefited from graduate transfers. That too is different depending on the program, but I think that I know we've had some sports that have had great success there. So I think you just got to look at your team and figure out, and every coach takes a different approach. It seems to me like a lot of our coaches, without trying to speak for them, have decided that they might use the portal to complement gaps that they may see on their roster, or there's sometimes those gaps are not just athletically. Sometimes you just might need some older men or women from a leadership standpoint who may be a little more seasoned and are coming with different experiences. Every program has its own needs, but we've always had transfers. The portal is different in that student athletes don't have to sit out if they use the one-time transfer exception, but we do have to get used to it, but transfers are not new, right? So just got to think about for each program what the best approach is.
Since the portal's really become a big thing in the last year or two, are there any specifics that you guys have made to your process, whether that's getting quicker answers for coaches, or anything that you can point to that's done differently in the last year or two?
As a result of the portal? Or in response to the portal?
Or happenstance, just anything that's changed with transfers in terms of Vanderbilt getting them in, getting the process faster, that sort of thing? Or anything on the horizon to make it easier for coaches?
Yeah, I think we've worked really hard when coaches are recruiting transfers, we don't want there to be a delay in the process because they don't know if that young person is getting into school. So I think we've worked really hard, and not just by ourselves, with our campus partners. So I actually don't view that as a current concern. May have been a historical concern, but it's not a current concern. Now, timing does matter. So sometimes if you're really late in the process, it could just be the timing that makes it challenging. So I think that's a place where we've just had to be nimble. So in response to the transfer portal, because those transfers opportunities could come at any time. I'm trying to think if there's anything. The thing about the transfer portal is that a lot of times young people are making decisions quickly. So one advantage that we have, the sense of community here, I think is very strong. And so that family environment, I think coaches work very hard to build a family environment. And so if you view the transfer portal as transactional, that's where, I think that you just have to be really thoughtful, because transactional can be the antithesis of what we're trying to build here, which is more about being more substantive and transformational. And yet, You have to be able to pivot and make decisions quickly. I'm not aware of a lot of roadblocks within that keep us from making those decisions. I think it's more about our coaches are very intentional about who they bring into this space because they value who they bring into the space. And I just think that's part of the responsibility that we all have. So, did that answer your question?
There's been talk around the league about how to do divisions with 16 teams, who's going to play who, the rivalries. Any strong opinions on what you would like to see? I know nothing's been really settled. It's probably been discussed.
Yeah, it continues to be an open question. All I care about is growing our program. So no matter who we play and when we play them, that we're ready.
With the addition of those schools, does it help Vanderbilt?
Does it help Vanderbilt? Well, anything that helps elevate the brand of the SEC helps Vanderbilt. So I'm happy that we're the best conference in the country, and my sole focus, and I promise I'm not being flippant. I'm trying to be disciplined enough. Also for our coaches and for our student athletes to focus on the things that we can control, and that's being the very best Vanderbilt. And if we are the best Vanderbilt, we will compete and win. So it is an attribute to be a part of the SEC. I talk about that all the time. We're very proud of that. We need to reflect the excellence that this conference stands for and that our institution stands for. So anything that's good for the SEC, I think, is good for Vanderbilt.
Hawkins Field, what would renovations or improvements or anything look like? And would that include a deck over the infield?
So I'm trying to think when that was. I can't remember when that was where, I don't know, it was probably a Vandy United press release where we casually talked about the fact that fans could expect baseball stadium renovations. I think we mentioned tennis in there. So if we mention it publicly like that, that's because we have started the design process. So we have done that with Populous, the architecture firm that we're using out of Kansas City. And Coach Corbin and his staff are part of those conversations with us. When they get to a point, which I think that'll be relatively soon, where we can actually show those designs, it'll answer some of those questions. I don't want to get ahead of that, but lots of wonderful things are on the table to think about how we maximize our footprint over there. And also, I know I'm facing the camera, but I can see Hawkins, so I turned that. I think very soon we'll be able to talk about it to answer your questions. I just don't want to speak prematurely because there are a number of design options on the table. We are thinking about fans and their amenities, though, as part of that design. So I think people will be pleased with that.
Speaking of Vandy United, are you pleased with the fundraising efforts that have already come forward and moving forward too?
I am. I'm really grateful because we've had tremendous support from fans and from alumni and donors, and we have more to raise because there are a lot of things we want to do. I will admit to you, it is a very ambitious plan. And when you haven't built something in a long time, there's just a lot you have to do. So I have been, I'm sort of cautiously saying, because I don't want the donations to stop, and I don't want to stop the support because it's been tremendous. It's been tremendous. I'm very pleased, and we have more work to do.
I'm going to circle back to the
Sure.
expansion. We saw the American Athletic Conference kind of, they're adding some people and making changes sooner rather than later. 23 is going to be their change. How much has that maybe been a conversation on whether that timeline gets changed or accelerated for the SEC's additions?
Right now, we're preparing for the conference to expand in 25. So that's what we're preparing on. There may be things that could change. We're not aware of those at this time, so we're preparing for 25.
Start of football facilities and basketball, I think that's supposed to begin after your last football game. Is that correct?
I think that after the last football game, you'll be able to see it, but it actually has started. It's just that we have to be really careful to work around to make sure that we don't disrupt the field and the facility so we can actually play. This is that part where I too get frustrated because all of the non-visible construction stuff has to happen before you actually get to see the fun stuff. That has already occurred. You know, if you're paying close attention, I think you will be able to see some differences during the season in that north end zone, but you will really be able to see it after we play our last game, because then we don't have to worry how people are entering and exiting the building and just trying to be mindful of traffic. Yeah, so it is actually technically already begun.
I guess you'll play 2023 with kind of a stadium that's in transition.
Yeah, so we have no plans of having to move out of the stadium, right, or play in an alternate location, but while the construction's underway. But you're right, that's a good way to describe it, a stadium in transition. Yes, I think.
There'll be seat removal and some things like that, but just necessary to the next phase.
Yes,
okay,
that's correct.
How many seats will you play with in 2023?
I can't say for sure because it depends on, ultimately in 23, specifically in 23, because I'm trying to think of, we won't be done in 23. We're going to remove seats as part of the south end zone, and then we will end up ultimately